So good morning, everybody. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin. Bitcoin has been on fire, baby. Yeah. And some of these guys, some of these billionaires that says, I ain't never going to get in Bitcoin. It's just a fad. It's going to come and go. Well, guess what? Mark Cuban, how much did you invest in Bitcoin after saying Bitcoin is just it's nothing. It ain't never going to amount to nothing, and it ain't nothing. So how much did you invest in Bitcoin?
Way be a storage of value, blockchain. Anybody
Blockchain's
can use
not.
it.
Blockchain effectively is software.
Okay, so
it's a
what-
distributed database that's managed independently, and that inherent combination makes it a utility, makes it software effectively that has value and utility.
So when somebody's running around trying to raise a blockchain fund,
And what happens when Walmart buys $1 billion of Bitcoin? Though no purchases have been announced, Walmart's inevitable allocation to Bitcoin will jumpstart a ripple of hyper-Bitcoinization. MicroStrategy, Square, and Coinbase are multi-million-dollar companies traded on NASDAQ with big Bitcoin bags, but the everyday American could care less. Ask your average Joe how he feels about Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy purchasing of 91,326 Bitcoin, and you'll probably get a, "What is Bitcoin?" and "Michael who?" Walmart, on the other hand, is a different story because it's the epitome of working class America. Built off the backs of America's mom and pop, it is now the world's largest company by revenue, raking in $548 billion in 2020. When Walmart adds $1 billion of Bitcoin to its balance sheet, you'll have the same average Joe's full attention. It will create the ultimate exposure for Bitcoin to blue-collar Americans and trigger a global monetary paradigm shift that is long overdue.
that's just a software for hire fund.
In some respects, but there's a specific, there are very unique use cases for blockchain. So, for instance, when people say there's no value no intrinsic value, but everything else it's a collectible.
Okay, so Bitcoin and gold on the same level for
They're
you.
both collectibles.
Okay.
The value is based off of supply and demand. To crypto, they don't really look at the value of blockchain. Now, when you take blockchains from different types of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin versus Ethereum versus others, there's significant differences, but blockchain in general does have at least a basic intrinsic value. Not as high as what the cryptos trade for, but there is basic intrinsic value. And I'll give you an example. If, for instance, there was a blockchain-driven general ledger system that had auditing capabilities.
Yeah.
So for instance, for a big company, you wanted to have a truly independent auditor so you would set up a general ledger system using blockchains where an external third party would be able to look at different segments of the general ledger. There wouldn't just be one auditor. You can have
It
three.
makes the process more efficient, so it adds value there.
Well, but it makes it not just more efficient, but it makes it truly independent.
But there's no equity that I can buy in blockchain.
Well, but let me finish. Imagine if this was a system used for Enron.
Yeah.
So that instead of having Arthur Anderson doing their auditing and their accounting, and we know what happened from there, the auditors and the accountants there were three different auditors and accountants that just using blockchain were able to look at a specific segment of their general ledger and
So they would have caught the fraud way earlier.
They would have caught the fraud because you couldn't fake out all three of them.
So
Everyone hear that? Mark Cuban, subscribe to the Defiant.
It's a really good newsletter. I appreciate it.
Awesome. That's so great to hear. Mark has made waves recently in DeFi. He's been tweeting about using Aave and buying and selling NFTs. So that's really cool to hear. And I'm really excited to talk about all that stuff with him. But first, let's go back in time a bit and just tell me about your crypto journey. Like, what first got you interested in crypto and Bitcoin? And what was kind of your first reaction to this?
So I'll go back to the beginning. When Coinbase first came out, I like to play with technology. I'm a tech geek and have been for a long time. And so I tried it. Some people sent me some Bitcoin because it was dirt cheap back then and wanted me to see it. But the conversation back then was mostly about it becoming a currency. And, that's why they're called cryptocurrency, which is really a misnomer, right? Because very few of them, if any of them, are actually currencies. And so as somebody who had written software, and I did a lot with distributed databases, my very first company, we were a systems integrator. So I would write, multi-user applications, distributed applications. And then I sold my company to CompuServe, which had a worldwide network that Visa was on. And I did a lot of business with Lotus Notes, which had replication servers. And so I really had an understanding, not as much as some people, but what I felt was a strong understanding on distributed databases and, decentralized databases. And so I was all in on blockchain. But like any other new programming language or platform or anything, there was a long ways to go before, blockchain was really going to be ubiquitous. But, even back in the beginning, I remember getting into arguments with people at South by Southwest back then. I was all in on blockchain, but the argument on Bitcoin in particular was always it was going to be a currency. And over the next 5 years, I was certainly a naysayer. And to this day, I'm not a believer that Bitcoin will become a currency. And most Bitcoiners aren't even saying it's a currency anymore. And when they had the split in 2017, that kind of confirmed, right? You're not going to do it. And, I've listened to all the talk about Lightning over the years and how that was going to change everything. And, it just hasn't. So, long story short, what really started to change was even after 2017 and the big price movements, over the last year or so, you've seen people maybe 2 years, only start to refer to Bitcoin as a store of value. Nobody's really talking up the whole currency thing any longer. At the Dallas Mavericks, we started taking Bitcoin for tickets and other purchases back in, I think, 2015. And I think ever since then, we've sold maybe $300 worth. People just don't want it. And I did it because I wanted to see if people would actually use it as a currency. And, back then, some people tried. You had people going across the country trying to live off of Bitcoin and all that. But now people are like, no, I'm not going to spend my Bitcoin as a currency. I want to see it appreciate. So what really changed was, one, watching people change their mind about it being a currency and start recognizing that it's only a store of value. And two, starting to see the maturation of blockchain apps, particularly on Ethereum. And then three, this past summer, watching DeFi go nuts. So for me, DeFi really was, okay, now blockchain in particular is really starting to mature. You're starting to see applications that are really coming into play. You're starting to see NFT, and it's not so much just about how much is sold and gross market value, but more just that people are becoming more comfortable with it. And so we're starting to see these applications that are just popping up left and right. And it reminded me so much of the early days of the internet, where, the mid 90s, people started talking about internet applications, but the internet had been around for 10 years, right? But it was mostly in universities. And so it was very analogous to what's going on with blockchain. You had early adopter applications, you had banks and private organizations trying to use blockchain. You had people trying to come up with, new ways to use it. And then bam, smart contracts came along and it just blew up. And Bitcoin no longer was all about, well, it's going to be a currency, and then people would argue about the block size and all that shit, right? It was more now, okay, what can smart contracts do? And now that people have come up with these ideas and people are starting to put money into it, you're really starting to see it. So that's what's got me really excited lately.
that's our general sense. Why are you now bullish on you weren't bullish on Bitcoin before,
Right.
rather, but why are you so bullish on DeFi now? What's kind of changed for you?
So let's go through it. So when Bitcoin first started really becoming popular in the early days, let's put aside 2009, 10, 11, 12, right? You know, I was very familiar with it, very familiar with blockchain, but the original presentation or narrative, if you will, was that it was a currency, right? That it was going to be used as a currency by normal people in normal circumstances. And I just never saw that happening. To this day, I don't see it as being a replacement currency for the US dollar or for any sovereign nation for that matter. Is it a better way to transfer money? Yeah, of course, right? Are there significant benefits to Bitcoin? Yeah, of course. But it's really evolved to being a store of value. For the longest time, store of value was not the key to Bitcoin, right? There was going to be Lightning, and that was going to allow all these transactions to take place and yada, yada. And so that to me never got me excited because I still don't think that'll happen. But I've always thought it could be a store of value. I've always compared it to gold, and you know, it's what people will pay for it. But what really changed is over the last year, as I started getting more into smart contracts in particular, and really understanding more about their capability and seeing the enhancements that had been made, that was the first thing that got me excited. What made me really blow up on it and really get fired up about it is when I went to mintable.app and minted my first NFT. And it wasn't so much just minting the process, but when I saw the royalties, right, that was the game changer.